Welcome back to Dragons and Disasters. Today, we're taking the thrilling, totally unpredictable chaos of Dungeons and Dragons combat and bringing it into crystal clear focus. Seriously, if you've ever felt that spike of panic when your dungeon master grins and says, "Roll for initiative," well, this explainer is exactly what you need. All right, let's dive right into a terrifying scenario straight out of the official rulebook to see how the game resolves all this incredible tension. Picture this. You're creeping deep in the crypts of Castle Ravenloft. There's yellow lichen on the ceiling, ancient bones resting in the alcoves, and then, suddenly, those bones start rattling. 10 hostile skeletons lurch to their feet and completely surround your party. The panic absolutely sets in. But how do we actually translate that narrative panic into a structured mechanical fight on the table? To survive this, we're going to break combat down into 4 easy steps: starting the encounter, the action economy, resolving attacks, and damage and conditions. Let's kick things off with step 1, starting the encounter and rolling for initiative. The very first thing that happens when swords are drawn, spells are prepped, and monsters start roaring is establishing who actually gets to act first. In our Castle Ravenloft case study here, the Dungeon Master Jared describes the skeletons animating. Now, before anyone can swing a sword or just run away screaming, he immediately calls for an initiative roll. This is that exact crucial moment where the game shifts from free-flowing exploration right into these structured turns of combat. So, what exactly is that? Think of initiative as your combat timeline. You roll a 20-sided die and add your dexterity modifier to see just how quickly your character reacts to the threat. And hey, sometimes a DM might just use a flat initiative score for creatures, which is just 10 plus their dex modifier. In our Ravenloft example, the skeletons rolled an incredibly lucky 20. That means they get the jump, establish dominance in the turn order, and get to act before almost everyone else in the party. Yikes. All right. Moving on to step 2, the action economy and making your move. Now, what can you actually do when it's finally your turn? The game is heavily governed by the one thing at a time principle. You don't just get to do everything you want all at once. Instead, you're given a very specific budget for your turn. You can move a distance up to your character's speed. You get 1 main action. You might get 1 bonus action, but only if a specific spell or class feature allows it. And finally, you get 1 reaction per round. You can actually use that reaction outside of your turn when a specific trigger happens, like, say, an enemy trying to run away from you. You really have an incredible amount of tactical options for that main action. Most of the time, you're going to attack a monster or cast magic. But surviving the multiverse requires thinking outside the box. You can use the dodge action, focusing entirely on avoiding attacks and giving enemies disadvantage when they try to hit you. You can dash to basically double your movement speed for the turn and make a clean getaway. Or you can disengage, which lets you slip away from a monster without provoking any of those nasty opportunity attacks. Step 3, resolving attacks, also known as the D20 test. So, when you step up and choose that attack action, how do we know if you actually hit the monster, or if your blade just harmlessly bounces off their armor? Well, this brings us to the core mechanic of the entire game, the D20 test. Whether you're swinging a sword or firing a longbow, resolving an attack follows 3 simple steps. First, roll a 20-sided die. Second, add your modifiers, usually your strength or dexterity, plus your proficiency bonus. And third, compare that total to your target's defense. For a combat attack, that target number you're trying to meet or beat is called the creature's armor class, or AC. Just take a look at the giant spider's stat block right here. It clearly highlights an armor class of 14. This means that after you roll your d20 and add your bonuses, your final result must be a 14, 15, or higher to actually pierce its tough exoskeleton. Roll a 13 total? Oof, your attack misses, just glancing off its hairy legs or hitting thin air. But keep in mind, your positioning on the battlefield matters immensely when you're making these attacks. Melee attacks are up close and personal, typically requiring a 5-foot reach, which literally means you have to be standing right next to the monster. Ranged attacks, on the other hand, like shooting a bow or casting certain spells, are fantastic for hitting foes from afar. However, if you try to make a ranged attack while a hostile creature is right up in your grill, you suffer disadvantage. That means you have to roll 2 d20s and take the lower result. It perfectly represents the difficulty of aiming a bow while a goblin is actively trying to stab you. Which brings us to step 4, damage and conditions, or the aftermath of a hit. All right, you've rolled your d20, you've beaten the monster's armor class, and you've secured a hit. Now it's time for the really fun part, dealing damage. In D&D, attacks don't just deal generic damage. They fall into very specific categories. A warhammer deals bludgeoning damage. A rapier or a monster's fangs deal piercing damage. A longsword deals slashing damage. And spells like fireball deal, well, you guessed it, fire damage. Understanding these types is absolutely vital because creatures in the D&D multiverse react very, very differently depending on what hits them.
For example, let's look at the imp stat block here. Reading carefully under its stats, we see it has resistance to cold, meaning it only takes half damage from ice attacks. But even more critically, it has immunity to fire. If your wizard rolls incredibly high and blasts this little fiend with 40 points of fire damage, it takes absolutely 0 damage. None. It will literally just sit in the flames and laugh at you.
Conversely, returning to our initial scenario in Castle Ravenloft, our adventurer Shreve really knows her stuff. She successfully hits a skeleton with a sword for 7 slashing damage, but then immediately drops her blade and draws a warhammer instead. Why? Because skeletons have a specific vulnerability to bludgeoning damage. This means they take double the pain. A 7 damage hit with a hammer instantly becomes 14 damage, just shattering the skeleton to pieces. As you and your party chip away at a creature's health, you can actually track their visible status. The rules define a specific condition called bloodied. A monster is considered bloodied the moment it drops to half its hit points or fewer. This is a great cue for the dungeon master to describe the monster looking winded, heavily bruised, or desperate, letting the players know they're officially winning the war of attrition. But what happens when those hit points finally reach 0? Well, the game draws a pretty sharp distinction here. When a standard monster's hit points drop to 0, it usually dies instantly, threat neutralized. But player characters are the heroes of the story. When your character drops to 0 hit points, you don't instantly die. Instead, you fall unconscious and you enter a high-stakes, terrifying minigame right in the middle of the battlefield. And the magic number for that minigame is 3. To survive, an unconscious player at 0 hit points must make death saving throws at the start of each of their turns. You roll a d20, a 10 or higher is a success, a 9 or lower is a failure. You need to accumulate 3 successes to stabilize and survive. But if you accumulate 3 failures first, your character perishes for good. No way around it, it is the ultimate tension builder at any game table. Let's do a quick recap on mastering the flow of battle.
We've broken it all down from the very first initiative roll right through the strategic choices of the action economy, mastering the D20 test, and finally navigating damage types. Returning to our Castle Ravenloft combat log one last time, you can see how flawlessly every single rule works together. The skeletons roll high initiative. A player named Maeve uses her reaction out of turn to cast a shield spell, deflecting a blow. Another player uses their bonus action to cleverly disengage, and Shreve exploits weapon vulnerabilities to smash bones into dust. It all weaves together to create dynamic, incredible encounters.
So, now that you hold the knowledge of the action economy, the D20 test, and the secrets of damage vulnerabilities, how will you strategize your next move? The next time your DM smirks and says, "Roll for initiative," you'll be ready. If this explainer helped you master the battlefield, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to Dragons and Disasters for more epic tabletop breakdowns, and leave a comment below telling us about your wildest combat encounter. Stay safe out there in the multiverse, adventurers.